Chapter 20. Beneath the Sarin Sky, Part 5. The storm lashed down as Thomas trudged through the thick field, rain drenching him to the bone and plastering mud onto his boots. Every few steps he glanced over his shoulder, his grip steady yet strained as he supported Lucas and Mina, both still limp and unresponsive, clinging to him unconsciously. Exhaustion clawed at him, but he pushed on, eyes narrowed in focus. The cornfield loomed all around them, stalks towering and offering cover from above, but the ominous whirring of drones not far behind spurred him forward. Breaking through the edge of the field, Thomas staggered into a forest. Dense, dark, and tangled, it was exactly the cover they needed. He pressed forward, lungs burning, every muscle aching as he struggled beneath the weight of his friends. The sounds of the drones grew louder, but he slipped behind a wall of thick brush just as they passed overhead, sweeping their beams across the cornfield. For a moment, he allowed himself a brief rest, leaning against a tree, breathing heavily as he scanned the area for any signs of movement. The forest was alive, vibrant with the smell of damp earth and wet leaves, yet it held a quiet solace. The dark shapes of Lucas and Mina weighed down his shoulders, and he knew he couldn't stop here. Gritting his teeth, he continued forward. After nearly an hour of walking, Thomas finally found a small, well-hidden clearing sheltered by dense foliage and thorny bushes. Carefully, he laid Lucas and Mina on the ground, brushing stray leaves from their faces. He crouched, keeping his breathing low as he surveyed the perimeter. The forest was silent except for the rain, muffling the sound of anything that could approach. Satisfied, he allowed himself a moment of respite. Thomas took a seat on the damp ground nearby, shivering slightly as he leaned back against the rough bark of a tree. His gaze lingered on Lucas and Mina, their faces pale but peaceful in sleep, oblivious to the turmoil around them. The rain had started to slow, a prelude to the storm's next fury, but for now only scattered drops fell, dotting their hair and soaking into their clothes. A hint of color appeared in the sky, signaling dawn. The sky shifted from midnight blue to a faint, misty gray. But just as he allowed himself to hope for some relief, a mechanical buzz sliced through the morning air. He froze, muscles taut as he spotted a drone emerging through the trees, its spotlight trained in his direction. Instinct took over. Thomas grabbed a nearby branch he had fashioned earlier, a makeshift club from a sturdy tree limb. His hands tightened around the branch's rough edges as he rose to his feet, his heart hammering in his chest. The drone advanced, hovering low as it identified him, whirring ominously. With a swift swing, Thomas struck the drone, catching it off guard. The drone retaliated, emitting a high-pitched frequency that drilled into his ears, making him wince as he struggled to maintain his grip. His left arm, still coated in a thick layer of restraining foam from the earlier ambush, felt leaden and numb, but he fought through the discomfort. He swung again, the club making a satisfying crack against the drone's metal shell, denting its exterior. Lucas and Mina stirred, eyes blinking open to the sight of Thomas locked in a brutal dance with the drone. Confused and groggy, they struggled to orient themselves, watching as Thomas delivered a final, powerful blow. With a metallic groan, the drone crashed to the ground, its circuits sparking erratically. "Get up," Thomas barked, already moving toward them. "More are coming. We have to go." Lucas stumbled to his feet, still woozy, but instinct took over as he crouched down to scavenge parts from the ruined drone. A few bright, crystal-like cores caught his eye, and he pocketed them hurriedly. Mina, noticing, asked, "Why take those?" "Power crystals," Lucas replied tersely, a small spark of excitement in his otherwise exhausted eyes. "They're invaluable." Thomas glanced back at Lucas, nodding in grim approval. "Let's move." Without another word, he led them into the forest, deeper into the shadows where the trees grew thicker, providing natural cover. The storm renewed its fury, rain pouring in sheets as the three of them trudged onward. The rain made it difficult to see, and mud squelched beneath their feet, but they moved as quickly as their exhaustion allowed. Thomas, his face lined with fatigue, explained the events of the previous night, how he'd fought off security officers, used the researcher as a decoy, and narrowly escaped with them through the cornfields. Hours passed, and the landscape gradually shifted. The dense forest gave way to a marshy terrain, water pooling around their feet and making the journey even more arduous. Every step seemed to take more effort, each obstacle a reminder of how close they were to breaking. Lucas stumbled often, his energy reserves depleted, but Mina, slightly more recovered, lent him her arm, drawing from her own magic to keep her footing steady. Thomas's steps grew slower, his face etched with exhaustion, but his gaze remained focused on the horizon. As they continued through the marsh, Mina took brief moments to climb a few scattered dead trees, scanning for any sign of the great river, which she knew would offer their next chance at escape. Finally, as they emerged from the marshland, they found themselves in a new forest, one less dense and rich with color, filled with trees whose leaves held a strange silvery tint. Lucas recognized them from his studies, the rare sarin trees, known for their resilient foliage and ethereal beauty. "It's beautiful," Mina murmured, marveling at the bluish-green leaves glistening in the morning light, the storm easing to a soft drizzle. They moved forward, finding some respite in the calmness of the forest. Birds began to sing again, a hesitant symphony as if testing the air after the storm's fury. The trees seemed to offer shelter and peace, their soft bark soothing to the touch, and beneath them grew bushes laden with small edible berries. Lucas picked a few, handing them to Thomas and Mina, who accepted gratefully. As they walked, the sound of rushing water grew louder, until at last they reached a cliff overlooking the great river. The powerful current surged below, its waters glinting under the first rays of sunlight breaking through the clouds. The river stretched north and south, a vast, imposing barrier that offered both promise and peril. A little further south, the great bridge spanned the river, an ancient marvel of dwarfish engineering, its wide stone arches standing as a testament to an era of unity and trade between the lands. For a moment they paused, taking in the breathtaking sight, the beauty almost surreal after the chaos and fear of their escape. Thomas sank to the ground beneath one of the sarin trees, his back against the trunk. He exhaled a long, weary breath, his eyes closing as he finally allowed himself to rest. Mina and Lucas sat close by, the three of them sharing a quiet, peaceful moment as they admired the view. Lucas leaned against Mina, their shoulders touching, grounding each other after the long night. "I'm glad you were there," Lucas murmured to Thomas, voice soft but sincere. "I owe you, my life, both of you." Thomas opened one eye, a faint, tired smile curving his lips. "You do the same for me." He paused, shifting to a more comfortable position as the exhaustion washed over him. "Get some rest, too. We're not out of this yet." Mina glanced over at Thomas's arm, still coated with the dried foam from the drone's stun weapon. Carefully, she began to scrape away the hardened material, her touch gentle as she worked to free his arm. She shot him a grateful look. "Thanks for keeping us safe." He nodded, closing his eyes as he leaned his head back, letting himself drift into a much-needed sleep. Lucas wrapped an arm around Mina's shoulders, pulling her close, as they both gazed out over the river, the rising sun casting golden light across the landscape. For the first time in what felt like forever, there was peace. They sat together, watching the sunlight filter through the silver leaves, casting soft shadows across the grass. The bridge in the distance stood as a silent symbol of hope and endurance, a path forward that promised the possibility of safety, if only they could reach it. The quiet of the morning, the beauty of the river, and the steady presence of each other filled them with a renewed sense of purpose. As the sun climbed higher, the storm clouds began to dissipate, leaving behind only traces of their passing in the form of scattered raindrops and distant thunder. The world was bright, the air fresh and tinged with the scent of rain, and for a brief, precious moment, the three of them could forget the chase, the danger, and the shadows trailing them. They had survived another night, and as they sat on the cliff watching the river flow, they could almost believe in the promise of a new beginning.